His Excellency Edgar Chagwa Lungu, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, His High Excellency Chief Dr. Jewel Howard Taylor, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, of course all the delegates here, ministers, honorables, thank you very much for joining us. Now, to the heads of state who are joining us now, normally when you have a class and the teacher was not there, it's upon the prefect to report on what was said before, and then we assess on whether the conversations will be carried on from there. So early on in the day, we had some sentiments, even from the report that was presented, the 3-year report, trying to assess where exactly we are. And here are some key findings. Number one, for all those who are fans of football, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, I'm not looking at anyone. For all those who are fans of football, a stark reminder that most of us know where our teams or how our teams are performing in FIFA. Most of us know. If you ask them, number 45, we did not even make it. But if you ask people what SDG 8 is, or what SDGs they've prioritized in their countries, most of us do not know. So that was a challenge to most of us when we were kicking off, trying to tell people that we should have the same enthusiasm as we have for our everyday life to things that actually affect our everyday life. We also had conversations on not to take SDGs as a New York project, to have it as an African and African countries project. We talked about countries using 20% of the budget, others around the world even up to 40% of their budget. Of course, the question posed there was how exactly will we ensure development when we are not ensuring that the resources there are utilized? Performance-based funding. In this case, we had Rwanda as an example. One of the people who was in the auditorium came and spoke on the side that if we don't implement performance-based funding, we will not have the same amount of success that we're anticipating. And of course, a crucial reminder that we're talking about big data within the context of the rest of the world, but in African context, we still struggle with small data. So when we are seeing big data run businesses around the world, we need to understand that we need to slowly and very carefully and deliberately have that in mind. So that was that. Now, moving on, we'd like to get to the official launch of the report. Some of you have actually seen it, but we'd like to do it officially now. And to give this welcome to the heads of state before we kick off with the rest of the session, please allow me to introduce Dr. Belay Begashaw, Director General of the Sustainable Development Goals Center for Africa. Please.
Good afternoon. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, SDG Center Founding Board Chair, and gracious host. Your Excellency, President Edgar Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia. Your Excellency, Honorable Chief Dr. Jewel Howard Taylor, Vice President of Republic of Liberia. Your Excellency Musa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Dr. Vera Songi, Executive Director, Secretary of UNECA, Senior Vice President Kato Hirishi, Honorable Ministers and Members of Parliament, Honorable SDG Center Board members, Honorable Heads of Diplomatic and Consular Missions and representatives of international organizations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and distinctive privilege to address you on this SDG 3 years reality check for Africa Conference. First of all, I would like to welcome you to this beautiful, clean, green city of Kigali, Morocco, Zanzibar. This is indeed a rare opportunity for me to have such an audience with extraordinary potential to influence transformation for Africa. And I will take this chance to share with you my passion and enthusiasm for what the SDG could do for humanity. The SDGs provided a shared vision of the world built on solidarity, human dignity, care for the environment, and inclusive participation with a promise not to leave anyone behind. The adoption of the SDGs in 2015 was an unprecedented move in terms of global consensus on what needs to be done, and we highly commend our leaders for the oversight and the commitments contained in the SDGs agenda. The Universal 17 Goals and 169 targets form a basis for social contract between the world leaders and their people. After 3 years along the journey, the SDG Center for Africa has conducted a reality check analysis to find out whether Africa is still in the right direction towards the SDGs and if it will get there on time. The conference will therefore reflect on this reality, agree on what and how to fix those things that are not working. During this conference, 2 reports will be officially launched. The Africa 2030 Sustainable Development Goals 3 Years Reality Check Report, which was already started to be discussed this morning with the wonderful panel, and the 2019 SDG Index and Dashboard Report. Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, this SDG assessment and conference is the first of its kind, and the SDG Center is very committed to ensure that Africa rises up to play a more significant part in agenda setting for the SDGs discourse, not only at continental level, but globally. The SDGs 3 Years Report, which is displayed here, compiled information from diverse sources and widely consulted a variety of stakeholders. It notes that there have been improvements in some SDGs, but overall, at current pace, progress remains off track, and goals will unlikely to be met. Africa lags far behind other regions in its prospects to achieve the goals. It is therefore needs to define its own pathways of acceleration to not only catch up with other regions, but prove that SDG ambitions can be realized in its context. I urge you to carefully read the report and seriously consider details of its findings and propose solutions moving forward. Evidence shows that there is a gap between what the SDG agendas demand and what is workable on the ground, partly due to the disadvantaged starting point of Africa in the SDGs journey. Accountability mechanism for SDGs, system to quantify contribution towards commitments made, and ways to enforce compliances have not been adequately addressed. The funding framework remains to be unclear. This, coupled with the scarcity of data, makes accountability for SDG financing difficult. To give you some examples of the financing challenge, 1 out of 5 African countries does not raise enough revenue to meet its basic state functions. External influences are constrained by inward-looking policies and tight global economic and financial conditions. Yet, financial outflows remains large, particularly through illicit financial flows. On a sad note, it is evident that the donor community has let down Africa. Even financing for SDGs of planetary nature, such as climate change and biodiversity, has not come true. It is unthinkable to expect low-income countries to fund such issues when they can barely meet the basic needs for health, education, food of their people. Financing for SDGs in Africa remains the most important challenge. Any realistic solution for SDG financing in Africa will bear fruit if it is conceived and promoted from within Africa. International support inevitably required, but it will effectively come when pulled rather than expecting that it will be pushed to Africa. No wonder the Rwandans have a proverb that says, outside support comes after the rains have stopped. No one wants to get wet because they are bringing your support for problems they themselves may not have. And instead, we Africans need to go out in the rain. We must internalize the problems we are facing and determined to address them now than later. I'm a big fan of the philosophy of President Kagame is promoting for Kwigira. At first, I thought it meant learning from, because literally that is the meaning, as I learned from my colleagues. But more inspiring, I learned that it is a strong Rwandan value that calls citizens to strive for self-reliance and dignity. This is what our continent must embrace. The 3 years reality check report provides suggestions on what needs to be done. Fortunately, some of the recommendations have been reviewed by technical experts in their respective areas in the previous 2 days conference here, and it's my hope that the outcome of this discussion will serve as key input as we continue the SDG journey. In light of this, 3 different themes were discussed as pre-conference in the last 2 days. 1, impact of the data on SDGs, effective monitoring and reporting system. 2, role of financial institution and innovation in developing financing. And 3, funds for critical sectors of health, education, and green water. I appreciate everyone's valuable contribution into the discussions. The second report the SDG Center launching today is the 2019 SDG Index and Dashboard Report. The index and dashboard serve as a tool for monitoring and planning for SDGs. It is produced by SDG Center Africa in collaboration with SDSN. This is the second report and will be produced every year going forward. There will be continued efforts to improve it to better reflect and address existing gaps, including the encouragement of increased generations and use of multi-sector and multi-stakeholders national data. The tool provides country ranking, scores, and dashboard, which is useful for planning, execution, and self-reflections. And the good news is that there is a great overlap between the SDG agenda and Africa on 2063 agenda. This is the overlap, which makes the SDG index relevant in supporting both the SDGs and 2063 agenda's implementation. The recently signed Memorandum of Understanding between SDG-CA and the African Union will further strengthen efforts to disseminate this tool across Africa. It has been proposed that there be a dedicated Africa SDG Day, and it's my sincere hope that this will be given due consideration. Allow me to highlight some of the pertinent issues that emerged from both the SDG 3 years and African Index report, as well as the previous 2 days thematic discussion that need your urgent consideration. First, there are large data gaps to measure SDG progress. Political support for statistics to enable a data revolution in Africa is urgently needed. Second, to ensure delivery on communication towards SDGs, there is need for the establishment of continent-based accountability mechanisms that will be in addition to support for existing ones. And third, there is a need to establish Africa-based fund for social inclusion, specifically in the critical sector of health, education, and water. Before I conclude my remark, I would like to sincerely appreciate the support from the government of Rwanda, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, Korean International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, and the One UN in Rwanda for the organization of this conference. I also want to thank and acknowledge the presence of all of you from diverse geographical and fields of expertise. Thank you for responding positively to our invitation. We have over 1,100 participants from more than 48 different countries, out of which 35 are from Africa. We are proud of you and call you comrades in this African SDG struggle. Let me also thank the SDG Center staff and all government ministries in Rwanda. Our special thanks goes to the Ministry of Finance and Rwandan Convention Bureau, which without this would not have been possible. Finally, I just want to emphasize that there is no other time to address these issues, as we have arrived at the tipping point. If we don't steer back to the right track and do our best to accelerate the pace towards the SDGs, it will be too late, and the cost of doing so later will be prohibitive. The SDG Center was the first to come to this battleground of advocating for SDGs achievements in Africa. We reiterate our continued commitment to this cause and declare that we will be the last to leave the battle. Let us all work together to build an Africa that we all are proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Belai. Now we have two more speakers before we get to the official launch of the SDGs 3-year report. So please allow me to call Dr. Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, speaking on behalf of the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed.
Your Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda and Chairperson of the SDG African Center. Your Excellency President Edgar Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia. Your Excellency Honorable Chief Jewel Howard Taylor, Vice President of Liberia, of the Republic of Liberia. Your Excellency, my brother Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. My brother, Mr. Bilay Begashor, Director General of the Sustainable Development Goals. Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Benin, representing the President Talon, Mr. Aurélien Obognoshi, and of course, our considered partners, the Senior Vice President of the World Bank, Mahmoud Moheldin, and the Vice President of JICA, Mr. Kato. Good morning. I stand here to represent the Deputy Secretary General. 4 years ago, leaders of the world came together at the United Nations and adopted the 2030 Agenda. It was a transformative vision for society to end poverty in all its forms in the next 15 years. It was a moment of great hope, a moment of aspiration. Governments responded to the common challenges they face around the world by uniting behind a truly forward-looking and yet urgent plan to end poverty and create shared prosperity for a healthier and peaceful planet. It was a moment where aspirations and dreams were turning into reality. Africa was truly part of a global multilateral agenda. While the MDGs were for Africa, the SDGs were designed with and by Africans. If we remember, we had Liberia with President Ellen Sirleaf Johnson in the three-man panel that decided over and advocated over the SDGs, Liberia, Indonesia, and the UK. In 2015, 195 countries also came together in Paris to agree on the Common Climate Paris Agreement, essentially to reduce emissions and to start fighting resilience. In 2015, the Pope, in a historic visit to the UN, said that it was impossible to fight justice if we did not fight climate change together, and that climate change was a question of justice and social inclusion. In 2015, the world came together in Addis Ababa to talk about financing Africa's development and the world's development. It is for that reason that we're here today, is to talk about what happened in 2015, the dreams that were laid by a multilateral global community to set pace for a world that will exist without poverty. Fast forward a few years later, that spirit of multilateralism, that spirit of togetherness, that spirit of social justice is under threat, is under decision-making, And we stand here today as Africa saying we may not meet the Sustainable Development Goals if we do not come back to a sense of stronger multilateralism, a sense of global community, and a sense of global justice. For, at the end of the day, the SDGs were about global justice. There has been progress, as the report tells us. And again, we want to congratulate the SDG Center for Africa for this report, because, as we always say, what you cannot measure, you cannot fix. We have made a lot of progress. Africa has gone below the 50% poverty mark. Most of Africa now understands what it means to live in a city, in a township, where you have access to education. Many more girls have access to primary education. The ECA, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, together with the global UN family, is committed to living within this mandate of ensuring that when we meet again as a UN family in the next decade to celebrate multilateralism, we will be saying that we have met the SDG goals. To do that, we need to do three things. Sustainable growth, ensure that our economies are growing again. When we met in 2015, Africa was growing at 6%. When we meet today, Africa is growing at 3.5%. We need to do better if we have to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. This growth has to be inclusive, it has to be diversified, and it has to ensure that we are exploring and using all the new technologies that we have. The second thing that is happening is, despite the progress, there is still a lot that needs to be done to ensure that we can meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The breadth of action and initiatives that the 2030 Agenda has inspired, the shift in development pathways to generate transformation required to meet the 2030 goals continues with new innovations every day, including here in Rwanda, where we were just recently for Smart Africa and experienced the breadth of new innovation that ensures that we can deliver services to those that are further afield. In 2018, over 30%, however, of Africans are still working poor. So we do talk about employment, but even those that are employed are poor, and we need to find a different solution for that. In 2018, while women have made progress on the gender agenda, 39% of the world's employment is done by women, but only 27% of the positions in management are held by women. Africa is making progress, and of course Rwanda is a beacon for that, but the rest of the continent still falls short behind. Violence against women remains an issue, which is part of the 2030 Agenda. Energy. Even though we are making a lot of progress, population growth on the continent is growing faster than access to energy on the continent. Therefore, we are actually falling behind on access to energy, which is SDG 7, and we need to do better. There is no escaping that the global landscape for the SDGs is therefore more difficult, with multilateralism shaking, with growth not only in Africa but in the global economy tapering a little bit. We need to find new ways of financing the SDGs, and I think that Dr. Begashaw has talked about the imperative for financing. When we meet again, we will talk about the Addis Ababa Agenda and have we met the promise of financing the SDGs. We cannot meet that promise if we do not go back to that spirit of 2015, of a multilateral society that is looking for justice across and beyond national borders, of a multilateral system that is open to trade. Africa is showing the light in terms of trade today by passing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, but it goes way beyond trade. It is about diversifying our economies and ensuring, I think as we saw this morning, the countries in Africa that have the largest global commodity markets are also the ones that are really falling behind Central Africa on the SDGs. Essentially, we need a diversified Central African economy to ensure that Central Africa comes together to ensure that we can meet the SDGs together. Technology is clearly going to be a solution as we move forward to ensure that the new multilateral system enables and ensures that no one is left behind. With new technology, we will have new data to find out where we can make sure that we take everybody with us. Non-state actors have become an important part of ensuring that we meet the SDGs. Against the backdrop of leaders that are going to be meeting in September to discuss the next decade of the SDGs, we stand as the United Nations with a renewed commitment to multilateralism to prevent and ensure that diplomacy will be essential the nexus between peace, security, and development, as the Secretary General always puts it, has become even more important, particularly for Africa, where we see the Sahel, Lake Chad, and the Horn of Africa, and issues around peace and security threatening the achievement of the SDGs. The commitment to the 2030 agenda remains strong. Hundreds of millions of young people believe in and are demanding change at the heart of this agenda. The SDG action is growing and safely being deployed with new technologies, including artificial intelligence, which can help us to ensure that we measure how fast we're going, that we ensure that as we move with everyone with us, to ensure that the transformation in the multilateral collaboration that will result in a successful SDG by 2030 is alive and well in our societies. In conclusion, Nelson Mandela once said, "One of the most difficult things is not to change society, but to change yourself so that you change society." I think that that is what the SDGs ask of us. For each and every one of the SDGs speaks to us individually and collectively. And were we to make a promise that we will all work together towards the accomplishments of the SDGs, I am sure that with everybody gathered in this room, the multilateral spirit that we have from our partners at the World Bank Group, at the IMF, and all the other multilateral and bilateral partners that work with the United Nations, we are sure that we will, when we meet in the next decade with the SDG Africa Center, be celebrating success of the SDGs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vera. Now, a lot of you have been noting, I'm seeing a lot of you noting down. So during one point when we have the next panel, you could also ask your questions on, okay, this is what is being presented on paper, but what's the reality on ground? So feel free during that time if time allows. Now we have just one more speaker before we officially launch. Please allow me to call His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson, African Union Commission.
Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Excellency Edgar Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, Excellency Vice President of Liberia, Excellency my sister Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of UNECA, Excellencies, Ministers, Master Director General of African Center for SDGs, Mr. Belay Begashaw, distinguished ambassadors and head of institutions, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for His Excellency President Paul Kagame for his commitment to the attainment of the development goals of the African continent. During his leadership at the helm of our organization, Africa has made considerable progress. Your country, Your Excellency, Rwanda, has made great strides in implementing Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is to say that the choice of Kigali to host this important meeting is not fortuitous. In this context, I am pleased to have the opportunity to address this conference on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa, reflections on a 3-year journey, and to share a few points on what the African Union is doing and what we must do more together to promote sustainable development in Africa. Let me start by underscoring the convergence between Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, which provide space for coordinated efforts between the African Union Commission, the United Nations, and other partners to attain our objectives. Agenda 2063 and the SDGs converge at all levels: the goals, targets, and the indicators. The two agendas play an important foundation for the realization of sustainable development and transformation in Africa. Their integration into national development plans and strategies with appropriate oversight and coordination mechanisms will promote economic and social development while preserving our environment. Attaining the goals and targets of the two agendas requires unprecedented levels of cooperation among stakeholders, closer coordination at the national, sectorial, subnational, and community levels, with increased participation of the private sector, civil society, and development partners is needed in planning, implementing, monitoring, and reporting progress towards the implementation of the two agendas. We must act now and act in concert to implement, monitor, and report progress on these agendas. In 2018, the Secretary General of the United Nations and myself signed the UN framework for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in order to capitalize on these opportunities by undertaking joint activities and developing joint tracking, monitoring, and financing frameworks. The recent review shows greater coordination and good progress in spearheading the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, data, ecosystems, monitoring and evaluation, migration, gender, climate change, peace, security, and development nexus. Excellences, distingués invités, puisqu'il s'agit d'une réflexion, permettez-moi de me permettre une certaine liberté de ton. Et permettez-moi aussi d'utiliser une métaphore pour réfléchir à haute voix avec vous sur le parcours des ODD depuis 3 ans, qui est le thème de notre conférence. Dans la vie des êtres humains, à 3 ans, un bébé sain de corps et d'esprit marche. Il parle. Il le fait mieux si les conditions de vie sont bonnes. Quoique les conditions ne sont pas forcément optimales en Afrique, et c'est une évidence, à quelques exceptions près, le bébé ODD marche. Il marche quand même. Il balbutie. Son langage n'est pas forcément très intelligible. Ses parents, la communauté internationale et particulièrement l'Union africaine, lui ont rêvé une vie meilleure, qui est contenue dans les 2 agendas 2063 et 2030. Mais il faut se poser la question, lui ont-ils créé les conditions et qu'ils les voulaient, les pouvaient-ils? Aussi, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi d'axer ma réflexion sur la triptyque intégration, prospérité et paix, qui est le triptyque qui résume le contenu de l'agenda africain, l'agenda 2063. Commençons par l'intégration. Sans l'intégration, point de salut pour un continent de plus d'1 milliard d'habitants, mais fragmenté en une constellation d'une 50aine d'États. Le passage de l'OUA à l'Union africaine, qui est une organisation d'intégration, est l'expression de cette volonté politique. Le traité d'Abuja en 1991 envisagé la mise en place d'une communauté économique africaine. On a vu la naissance des communautés économiques régionales. Il y en a au moins 8 qui sont reconnues par l'Union africaine. Plus récemment, dans le cadre de la réforme de l'Union africaine, et je voudrais rendre un hommage au président Kagame qui est en charge de ce dossier, aussi bien dans la réforme financière qu'institutionnelle, un accent particulier a été mis sur la nécessaire intégration du continent. Vous savez qu'il a été décidé que dorénavant, le sommet du mois de juin-juillet soit un sommet de coordination entre les communautés économiques régionales et l'Union africaine, et nous allons inaugurer la première session dans quelques jours, le 8 juillet à Niamey. Nous avons également, en 2018 et ici à Kigali, lancé le CFTA, la zone de libre-échange continentale. Cet accord a eu le nombre de ratifications nécessaires et il est entré en vigueur depuis le 30 mai. Nous allons, le 7 juillet prochain, le lancer officiellement à Niamey. C'est un pas significatif dans le sens de l'intégration. Nous avions lancé également cette même année le marché unique en matière de transport aérien. 28 États africains ont adhéré à cet accord qui, je l'espère, va permettre le décloisonnement du ciel africain. Nous avions également, par la même occasion, lancé le protocole de libre circulation du droit d'établissement du passeport africain. Là, malheureusement, il faut le dire qu'à ce jour, il n'y a que 2 États, le Rwanda et un autre, qui l'ont ratifié. On ne peut pas rendre effective l'intégration du continent si on n'ouvre pas les frontières, si on ne donne pas la possibilité aux travailleurs et aux entreprises d'aller d'un pays à un autre, de s'installer et d'y travailler. Je suis venu hier soir de Malabo, où se tiennent les assemblées annuelles de la BAD, qui ont pour thème également l'intégration du continent africain. J'ai plaidé, comme cela se doit, pour l'augmentation du capital de la BAD et de la reconstitution du Fonds africain de développement. Mais il a été souligné que malgré les efforts, les questions de financement se posent et se posent crûment. Comment les ODD peuvent être une réalité dans un continent où la question du financement reste presque entière? Comment connecter en matière d'énergie, en matière de communication, le continent quand on n'a pas les moyens suffisants pour pouvoir le faire? Le constat est là. Les ODD ne pourront jamais être une réalité si la question du financement n'est pas réglée. Des efforts en interne sont absolument nécessaires, mais un accompagnement également de la communauté internationale dans son ensemble l'est tout aussi. Le deuxième axe, c'est sur la prospérité. Il faut axer la démarche sur les secteurs prioritaires, notamment l'agriculture. Il a été décidé depuis un certain temps au niveau de l'Union africaine de consacrer au moins 10% du budget à l'agriculture. Décision célèbre qui a été prise à Malabo et qui, malheureusement, dans beaucoup de cas, peine à être une réalité. Comment industrialiser le continent? Comment développer les mines, l'énergie? Comment axer sur les secteurs sociaux, l'éducation, la formation, l'emploi? La problématique de la jeunesse et du genre reste importante. La question climatique. Le troisième axe, c'est celui de la paix. J'ai souvenance, dans mes anciennes fonctions, que quand on discutait des ODD, les pays africains ont insisté d'intégrer la dimension paix et sécurité comme un des éléments qui puissent permettre à la réalisation de ces objectifs, chose qui a été faite. L'Afrique, malheureusement, est devenue un théâtre d'instabilité. Le terrorisme, le trafic de tout genre sont une réalité dans ce continent. Je me dois de dire qu'en plus de notre architecture de paix et sécurité, récemment, le Fonds de la paix a été relancé. Je vois le docteur Kaberuka dans la salle. Merci beaucoup, docteur, pour ton soutien et tout ce que tu as fait dans la relance du Fonds de la paix, qui est doté maintenant d'un conseil d'administration, qui a pu requérir 116 millions de dollars de contribution des États membres. Certes, nous n'avons pas encore atteint l'objectif de 400 millions, mais nous sommes dans la bonne voie. Il faut que l'Afrique s'assume et s'assume notamment en assurant sa sécurité. Bien entendu, certains défis vont au-delà du continent et ne sont pas du fait du continent, notamment le terrorisme, qui est une menace à la paix et à la sécurité, et c'est là, comme vous le savez, du ressort du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies. Là aussi, une résolution importante est sur la table du Conseil de sécurité et nous demandons instamment nos partenaires à comprendre cette urgence et soutenir les efforts du continent africain. On ne peut pas atteindre les objectifs des ODD quand des pans entiers du continent africain est sous la pression de l'insécurité. Des pays du Sahel, dans la corne de l'Afrique, il arrive que des pays dépensent plus du tiers de leur budget pour des questions de sécurité, au détriment naturellement des secteurs sociaux, des indicateurs qui sont là pour pouvoir voir quels sont les pays qui ont rempli ou qui s'acheminent vers la réalisation des objectifs. J'ai parcouru ce matin le ranking qui a été fait. La plupart des États sont encore dans le rouge. C'est inquiétant. Mais ça s'explique. Ça s'explique parce que les conditions minimales ne sont pas remplies. Je ne dis pas ça pour nous soustraire de nos responsabilités. Nous devrons viser l'excellence, nous devrons faire des efforts, améliorer notre gouvernance économique, politique, sociale, compter sur nous-mêmes, changer notre façon de voir. Mais il y a également, malheureusement, des contraintes objectives qui font que nombre de nos États ne puissent pas, quoi qu'on l'ait voulu, atteindre des objectifs de millénaires. Le constat, nous l'avons fait le 6 mai dernier, quand nous nous sommes réunis dans le cadre de notre conférence annuelle avec les Nations Unies. Le secrétaire général des Nations Unies et moi-même avions constaté le manque de financement pour la mise en œuvre des ODD. Je me félicite de notre coopération. Nous avons convenu, comme je le disais, en 2018, de travailler ensemble, puisqu'il y a une convergence totale entre les deux agendas, de faire l'évaluation, de faire même les rapports en commun. J'espère que le rapport que nous allons faire sera un peu moins grave que celui que nous examinons aujourd'hui. Mais il n'y a pas de miracle. Il faut réunir un minimum de conditions pour que la situation s'améliore. Les suivis, l'amélioration, les données statistiques sont une nécessité. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs d'État et chefs de délégation, Mesdames et Messieurs, je conclurai en disant tout simplement que l'Afrique évolue dans un contexte des plus difficiles. Cela ne doit aucunement, je dis bien aucunement, nous donner une raison de désespérer. Il y a un potentiel extraordinaire dans ces continents, notamment ces ressources humaines jeunes ou nombreuses. Il faut s'en donner les moyens et de s'en convaincre. Les relations internationales ne sont pas bonnes pour l'instant. Le réflexe unilatérale commence à apparaître dangereusement. J'espère que les ODD connaîtront meilleur sort que les OMD. L'optimisme est de mise, même s'il n'est pas béat. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed. Thank you as well to Dr. Vera and Dr. Belai for the earlier sentiments. Now we've heard the addresses from our distinguished guests. Let's move to the core of why we convened here in Kigali. From the moment we adopted the SDGs in September 2015, we've had a very eye-opening 3 years. So, to officially give the opening remarks and launch of the SDGs 3-year report, let's all welcome His Excellency President Paul Kagame.
Excellency Edgar Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, Excellency Joel Howard Taylor, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dr. Belai Begasho, Director General of the SDGs Center for Africa, Dr. Songwe Vera, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Dr. Mahmoud Moherdin, Senior Vice President, World Bank Group, honorable ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. A good afternoon to you all and a very warm welcome to Rwanda. I wish to particularly thank President Lungu, Vice President Howard Taylor, and Chairperson Musa Faki, together with all the esteemed guests, for finding the time to join us today. Rwanda is proud to serve as host of the SDG Center for Africa. This institution is a true global partner which embodies the commitment and expertise needed to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. I wish to commend Dr. Belai and his team for the excellent work they have been doing to make the path forward both clear and actionable. A prime example is the SDG Center's new Africa 2030 3-year reality check, which I now have the honor to officially launch. As an African, this report makes for sobering reading. On almost every goal, our continent is not on track to achieve the 2030 targets. Even the best amongst us are lagging behind the rest of the world. This would not necessarily be discouraging if the rate of change was high. we all know where Africa is coming from and how much catching up we have to do. However, on too many indicators, the pace of progress is stagnant or even declining. The facts cannot be avoided and merit our full attention. I know you have had a rich discussion earlier this morning, and we have just heard important statements from Dr. Songwe on behalf of the United Nations and Chairperson Musa on behalf of the African Union. So let me just offer two brief thoughts for your consideration. First, the positive perspective. The SDGs are universal and ambitious, meaning they set targets that apply to countries at every level of economic development. Achieving the SDGs therefore represents the attainment of a significant level of prosperity and well-being, not merely the elimination of extreme poverty. In my view, it is preferable for Africa to aim high, even if it takes longer to get there than to aim low, and congratulate ourselves for doing the minimum. So long as we in Africa understand that it really is within our power to achieve these goals, we are going to be fine. But it will not happen by accident. We have to do the right things and find the money to pay for it, including investing in strong national statistics agencies. So the second point is about the SDG financing gap in Africa, which the report estimates at between $500 billion and $1.2 trillion per year. Whose problem is this? On the one hand, the SDGs are a global compact, which is very meaningful. But development assistance is not growing, and it is reasonable to expect that the trend to continue. Foreign investment is also flat. On the other hand, speeding up progress toward the SDGs is first and foremost our problem and responsibility as Africans. We live in an interdependent world and we work closely with partners. But the political leadership on this topic has to be heard most strongly from African voices. This is critical for bringing all stakeholders together and maintain momentum. And yes, we also have to pay as much of the cost as we can with our own resources, which are, by the way, not inconsiderable. It is therefore significant to learn in the report that remittances from the African diaspora are now the largest source of external income for our continent. This shows once again that we lack for nothing in Africa except a sense of urgency. The idea to establish dedicated African funds for education, water, and health has a lot of merit. This is an opportunity to work with Africa's partners in new and better ways and deliver human-scale projects that directly touch the lives of farmers, families, and school children. We are already 1/4 of the way to 2030. Africa can definitely make up for lost time, but we need a much faster pace. As we prepare for the SDG Review Summit later this year in New York, our goal should be to bring new energy and focus to the process. The work of SDG Center for Africa and the deliberations at this conference are critically important in that regard. I wish to thank all of you once again for your participation, and I look forward to joining my sisters and brothers in the next session for an interactive conversation. Asanteni sana.
Asante na wewe pia. Now, at this particular point, we'd like to invite our panelists for the next session, and the person who will at least try to fire some heat to just get them speaking a bit more in depth is Dr. Donald Kaberuka. Please, if you could just join us on stage. He is the AU Special Envoy on Finance and Chairman of the Global Fund. He goes first. Please, Dr. Kaberuka. After him, we have His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat. Please join us on stage as well. High Excellency, Honorable Chief Dr. Jewel C. Howard Taylor, Vice President, Republic of Liberia. His Excellency Edgar Chagwa Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia. And our host, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda. Dr. Kaberuka, it's all yours.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. So my task is very simple, is to facilitate a conversation among our leaders with the audience. Much has been said this morning, and I want to just note 3 things briefly. One of them is that the world in 2015 had perhaps the best plan ever for a prosperous world. We have heard also that the picture is mixed. And the third, which was said in different ways, was that unless we do something to come back on track, the chances are that what the World Bank report said recently will be true. That is to say that by 2030, there will still be 600 million people living in poverty, and 400 million of whom will be in sub-Saharan Africa. But we have enough room to do something. So my role is very simple, is to use the 45 minutes to try to facilitate a conversation between the leaders and yourselves. We have 45 minutes. I will give the leaders 3 minutes for opening remarks. I'll follow up with a question, and then I will open it up to you for questions. So I'm going to ask President Edgar Lungu, welcome to Rwanda, Mr. President. I think this is your second visit.
I'm not too sure whether it's my second or third, but I've
This is
been
third
here
visit.
long enough. Thank you.
May you come again, please. So I'll give you 3 minutes to make opening remarks.
Let me just take this opportunity to thank His Excellency President Paul Kagame for the warm reception that he has extended to me and my delegation since our arrival. And indeed, Mr. President, I cherish the cordial and friendly relationships that we exist between us. And it's a great honor for me and a privilege indeed to be here and be part of this platform. Well, as you have already said, the SDGs have been in place for over 3 years now. The question is, what concrete initiatives have we taken in our country and generally in meeting and monitoring the SDGs? We have aligned this in our 7th National Development Plan.
Hear Mr. President? You can hear the President? Yes, you can. Thank you.
Oh,
Please
thank
go.
you. Well, we have aligned our National Development Plan, which runs from 2017 to 2021, to the SDGs, and the 86% of the targets of the SDG targets aligned to our plan, and this implies that our government is implementing the program in the 7th National Development Plan simultaneously with the SDGs, and I think that's a very good way to make a start. In terms of monitoring, obviously, the mechanisms we use in the development plan are the same ones we're using to monitor the implementation of the SDGs. So we will surely do better than we did with the Millennium Development Goals. That's what we think.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, opening remarks.
Well, thank you, moderator. I think I've made too many remarks. I'll try to be very brief. I think this meeting is very important. The Center for SDGs on our continent is quite important and has done a very good job actually to bring out what needs to be done and even simplified it because there are too many things to talk about and to attend to within the SDGs framework, and sometimes too many things get lost on many people. And I think the simplification for easy consumption is a very welcome thing. And but I want to say, as we move forward, we really need to keep focused on making the difference in real terms. We can have SDGs well defined and understood and put before us. We need to move the longer distance of delivering on improving lives to a significant extent for our people, and in a way avoid what has been happening in the past many years, which you can see on our continent, of having to keep massaging poverty and living with it for as long as we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vice President Taylor.
Thank you. I would like to thank His Excellency, the President of Rwanda, for taking on this awesome responsibility, first of hosting the SDG office and following up and making sure that the targets set are being worked upon. I also would like to add my voice to His Excellency President Paul Kagame, in that the SDGs are indeed possible. 1 trillion, 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 1
I'm really frustrated about the fact that Africa has all of the human and natural resources available to us, yet we continue to complain about how our people live in abject poverty, have no access to basic human rights, and we keep looking across the street. The SDGs are possible if we have leaders that will make the political decisions, to make the right choices, to find a way to turn some of the internal resources that are possible to begin this process. And then we can go out and find out what additional resources can be put together to help us achieve the SDGs. So I'd like to stop here for the moment and just say again, it is possible. We must not drop the ball. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Chairman Moussa.
Je dirais tout simplement, bien qu'ambitieux, les objectifs contenus dans l'agenda 2063 et dans les autres idées, il est possible de les atteindre. Mais pour cela, il faut s'en convaincre, et s'en convaincre profondément. Ce n'est pas juste un fait de mode. Il faut de la volonté politique qui doit être accompagnée par des actions concrètes, sur le plan politique, sur le plan économique et sur le plan social. Le défi est global, l'effort doit être global, et certainement le succès ne pourrait qu'être global. Mais en tant qu'Africains, nous avons tous conscience que nous étions mal partis. Certains ont dit que même l'Afrique est mal partie. Il n'est jamais trop tard pour bien partir. Nous en avons le potentiel. Il suffit vraiment de s'en convaincre et d'agir en conséquence. Merci.
Merci, President. Thank you very much. Now, President Lungu, I don't want to put you on the spot, especially because you are our guest. I read a speech you made to Parliament of Zambia, opening Parliament in 2018, and I was very impressed by the way you spelled out the vision for Zambia by 2030. It mirrored exactly what is in the SDGs. And I was impressed by the way you were trying to get to it. But on the same day, I was reading that. I was reading the Zambian press, the concern by the Zambians that Zambia was taking on too much debt. I looked through the numbers. I did not necessarily agree, but I want to give you a chance to articulate for people here, and maybe those who are listening to you, how you think we can finance our development using domestic resources, mobilizing external resources, both grants and debt, which we need to be able to achieve the goals you wanted to achieve. And I want to add that I want to salute what you do, because the effort of the government in collecting domestic revenue is one of the best in this region. It was much better in the past, but I think you're on the way back to ensuring that you can mobilize enough domestic resources for funding the SDGs. So I'm giving you a chance to just clarify this issue, because I think it's of interest to people here, and maybe Zambians who might be listening to you.
Thank you so much. To start with, show me one country in the world which doesn't owe. All of us owe. It's a question of how we apply these resources that we borrow, whether we apply them to the intended objective or not. That's what's critical. We are all owing one another. And then what should bother you is the capacity to pay. Are you going to pay back in your lifetime, or are you going to burden the future generations? And these are key questions. Speaking for Zambia, I think we've had too much flight, illicit flows of resources. Take copper, for example. Recently, I had to take very drastic decisions on one giant mining company because of what we thought was the flight of resources from our country, tax evasion, and the dealings between, inside trading, if I may call it that. So I don't think that we're scared with the idea of borrowing. It doesn't scare us at all. What scares us is whether those resources are not being applied to the intended objectives. And once they're applied, I think, together with the private sector and the civil society and all of us, we can work our way through the difficulties that we have. And for me, that is why we are chosen to lead. So I think that consultation at all levels has been very key in our governance system. We want to make sure that we deliver what we promise to the people, because that is what is keeping us in power. And I would like to believe that no system can claim to be perfect, but all systems are subject to reform, and the dynamics which come to play from time to time change. But people should be able to look at, are we on course? And that's why we are here. We are here to discuss the SDGs. Already we are trying to check whether we are on course. And with us as a country and as a government, we'll constantly be checking ourselves. With the opposition, obviously, providing checks and balances, we'll get there. Otherwise, if you were all perfect, the SDGs would have gone home after New York, would have said, fine, we'll meet 10 years' time and see where we are, or in 2030. But we're not doing that. So this constant revisit, constant introspection and question is what we stand for. So we hear you when you say we have overborrowed. But the question is, we're borrowing for what? Infrastructure? Yes. Agriculture? Yes. Energy? Yes. Because with those, it will be easy for us to achieve most, if not all, of these SDGs that we have. And we stand very, very firm that if a system doesn't take check of itself, then it's bound to fail. We're not failing in Zambia, and we are in tune with these SDGs. And we believe that we are an integral part of the region and Africa, and together we'll succeed.
Thank you, President. Indeed, all countries in the world have access to capital markets. The issue is what you use money for and how you do it. So you're right. But let me pursue this further on the measures we are taking in Zambia to ensure that these investors, external companies, actually do pay what they should pay. And the measures you are taking, if you can elaborate a bit on this.
Well, it starts from planning. I would like to say that during our budgeting processes, we engage all stakeholders, private sector, civil society, government agencies, in fact, including the revenue masters, tax collectors, so that we agree on the threshold and why we think that things should be done properly. But ours is a win-win situation. We don't believe that because you have brought in money, you should get everything out of us and leave us poverty-stricken. We want to believe that when you get your money, we as the country, as the people, see ourselves as shareholders, such that when you get your dividend, you leave something with us in terms of taxes, so that we provide for the social sector. We do the roads, the hospitals, the schools. And we know that sometimes they use corporate social responsibility to mask and try to hoodwink us. But we welcome corporate social responsibility, but we cannot take that as the dividend due to the Zambian people. So tax should not worry anyone who wants to invest in Zambia, because tax is considered to be what you're paying for what you're getting out of the country. And on that score, we want to compare in the region. We want to compare with products. If you're mining copper, for example, in Congo, in Peru, in Chile, or elsewhere, what are you paying? And that's exactly where we begin saying, no, we are being given a road deal here, let's talk. And if you don't want to invest in Zambia on that score, go. Others will come and join us. And it has happened. Already there are people who are coming to say, can we take over this mine? Can we open greenfield mines? And I think it's because we are very healthy in our approach to raising revenue for our people. So I'd like to believe that we should not be ashamed to say that we know what's going on. And once we know, we'll call you and say, look, now that we know what is going on, can you increase your taxes?
Thank you. Please give a round of applause to my president. Thank you. Now to my own president. Mr. President, I listened to Vera Songwe just now. She's saying, look, 2015 was a year of great dreams. The world came together with this great plan. And a few years later, we live in a different world. Commitments that were made, whether it's climate change, whether it's multilateralism, has fallen by the wayside. Now, there are two ways to look at it. One of them to say this is a temporary aberration, because there are few leaders in the world who don't believe in multilateralism. There is a second way to look at it to say, actually, this is a shift which may not return us back to pre-2015. And I want you to help us understand what this means for we Africans, first of all, and what it means for the SDGs, because many of the SDGs, about 40% of them are global in nature. And I wanted you to help us, given the work you have done globally, in the Broadband Commission, in the SDGs themselves, in the African Union. What do you think this means for Africa and the attainment of the SDGs, this changed global environment?
When we look at these challenges, the problems on the global level, I think the first reaction should not be to despair or want to run away from the problems. Instead, I would prefer that we look at the situation providing the opportunities as well. There are huge opportunities involved. And the change that has been taking place across the globe will always be the case in terms of cycles. There will always be one change of one kind that is so broad or another. There is no question about it, whether it is the leaders that emerge that have impact in terms of their decisions affecting the whole world, or real things happening, events that, as you mentioned, the climate change and other things, people have just awakened up to, they've been waking up to some of these realities which at some point were not significantly visible as they are today. But for Africa, in my view, Africa is really having two tracks. One, it is so seriously challenged by a number of things. On the other hand, it is also endowed with not only resources but opportunities. Opportunities in the sense that the change we see happening, on the one hand, the populism that has been spreading, many parts of the world looking inward. On the first assumption, it's a huge problem that might even be insurmountable. On the other hand, why don't we see it also as an opportunity in the sense that Africa, to an extent, being left on our own, where we have been before anyway, with improved thinking and action, might actually be an opportunity. If you are left on your own to feel challenged and look for ways to get out of the problems, I think you are likely to find a way and move forward instead of being in a situation where, in actual fact, I can say Africa has been spoiled in a sense. Yes. We have been spoiled because whenever there is a problem, we cry, and there is somebody showing up and say, no, I can deal with your problem. It has happened so often. Yet, like the case we have heard from when you raised the issues with the president of Zambia, actually Zambia as a country is endowed with a lot of resources and therefore opportunities. If management of that situation improved, governance, skills, knowledge, which we are all trying to obtain for our countries, I think they can solve a big part of the problem. Now, it gets even better if our domestic situation is improved in that manner, and then we are cooperating, working together across the continent, across our borders, like we have already seen at the continental level with the new situation we have. Happy to have the chairperson of the African Union Commission, who represents a commission that has been at the core of these changes for our continent, assisted by different teams of leaders of our continent or technocrats from across our continent with different backgrounds of expertise. When we put together the African Continental Free Trade Area, that is huge. And it is going to take advantage of some of the situations obtaining as of the change sweeping across the world. Rallying and getting integration across the continent going, creating one African air transport market. As you said earlier, the Peace Fund that was mentioned earlier that has been created, the need to sit together and resolve some of our problems which we have always outsourced to others. I think this means things are beginning to happen. And in fact, we wanted 400 million for the Peace Fund. We are now over 100 million. That is a sign that we actually even have resources. We just need to be better organized in how we avail our resources, spend the resources, and towards and align that with the problems we have that we have to address. So for me, I don't think there is a need. Earlier, where we were discussing in another setting, and to what I have just said in a moment ago, I think time is now. Africa has to mobilize itself, resources, and better ways of approaching our problems, and then cooperating with the rest of the world to fill the gap that remains. And I think less attention paid to us is a good thing. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vice President Taylor, President Kagame just now in his remarks mentioned that we should aim not just at eliminating poverty, but we should aim higher. But I also mentioned that we come from the initial conditions and all this. Now your country, Liberia, has come from a long, long way. 10 years of mayhem and bloodshed and worse. I visited your country during the Ebola crisis, and what I saw was, to be honest, I've seen worse, but I never expected what I saw. The health system had completely collapsed, institutions completely not functioning, and I just keep wondering, when you look at these SDGs, bearing in mind where you come from, what is that special effort you will need to catch up for lost time and overcome those challenges? What would it take?
I think it will take strong political will, not only at the top, but at every level of governance. The Rwandan miracle, I call it, shows the rest of the world that if there's a vision and collective will, anything is possible. Truly, Liberia has its challenges. We have managed to hold together for more than 15 years of peace. And we've started from the beginning, trying very hard to rebuild the structures that we needed. We are a rich resource country, but like most countries in Africa, continue to do business the same old way. Having multilaterals come into our country, take out our resources, give nothing back, not paying proper taxes, using social corporate responsibilities as a way to blindfold the local areas. In the end, nothing really much is given to transform those areas. And so when they leave, huge holes are left, not just in the land, but in the hearts of our people. So what do we do? Our government is trying in a very challenging time when the prices for most of our commodities that we usually sell overseas are very low. We must now sit, and I think our president is involved in bringing together a national conference and determining what do we want for our country. What is the future we hope to have? What is the future we hope to leave for our children? And that will entail some very, very, very strong choices. We have to make the difficult decisions to transform the way we do business. The Liberian budget maybe is 80% salaries and recurrent expenditure. So you're never going to be able to build schools or to fund hospitals or to build roads. What the SDGs tell each of us as we strive to build better systems is that it is a regular problem that ties into the heart of nations: poverty, inequality, lack of resources. But if we put together what we have and begin first to change the way we do our budgets, if we're talking about education, then we must put monies in education. And we can begin at ensuring that there is quality in our schools. You will hear Liberia and other countries say we have a large population of young people now going to school. What are we teaching? Can we start at that level to ensure that where we put our funding, quality comes out of it? And that's a part of the SDGs. So it takes that kind of a leadership.
But Vice President, I'm not putting you on the spot, but some time back, all the children, or maybe not all, but the majority, failed their exams, secondary school exams. All the kids failed secondary school exams. Now, they suggested there was nothing wrong with the kids, there was something wrong with the system. You get what I mean?
Yes.
Tell me.
And what we've done when we took over, the president put in a plan first to pay those fees, which are a large portion of what the parents must pay. And so no one now in Liberia who takes those exams, the WIAC exams, pay the fees. So children can stay in school. What we had was a situation 2 months or 3 months before the WIAC exams. Kids are out of school, going from office to office, going to family members. Oh, we have to take WIAC, we can't afford it. And that took them out of a space where they should be learning and preparing for the exams. So we now, this is the first year we've done that, paid all of those fees for WIAC, and we're strengthening and providing additional training for our teachers so that the children stay and learn what they need. Again, it's about quality. What you put in is what you're going to get out. If you have children that are not in schools, even though they have opportunities to be so, it's a difficult process. We also now have a free educational system all the way up to 12th grade. We are struggling to make sure that those schools are brought up to standard so that we can begin to teach our children what they need to prepare them for the future.
Thank you very much. Just give a clap to our Vice President. For those who may not be familiar with these figures, Liberia up to 1979 was classified as a middle-income country. A middle-income country. all the human development indicators were up north. Now they are some of the lowest HDIs we have in the world. So you can understand the challenge they face. Musa, I'll ask you the last question, then I'll come to the floor. And I want to ask you about issues of security, stability, and the implication for the SDGs. Now, some crises one could understand, but do you think we Africans are doing enough in a place like the Sudan to ensure that what is a dispute, what is some contestation, does not deteriorate into worse and thereby undermine possibility of countries achieving SDGs? Okay, we have this peace fund now, the president referred to it, $120 million, we're on track. But money is one thing, but are you satisfied now that we have everything we need to ensure that crisis not become mega crisis and thereby undermine SDGs? But you can speak in French, Moussa, if you want.
Très bien. Je crois qu'au niveau de l'Union africaine, à ce jour, nous avons tous les instruments nécessaires sur le plan politique, sur la question de paix, de la sécurité, sur le plan économique, sur le plan social. Le tout, c'est de les appliquer, des implementation. Sur la question de la paix, vous qui êtes économiste, regardez ce qui se passe en Libye, au nord, un des pays les plus riches du continent. Somalie, à l'est, depuis presque 3 décennies. L'un des plus importants pays qui a la côte la plus importante. En Afrique de l'Est. Vous prenez le Mali, en Afrique de l'Ouest. Vous prenez la République démocratique du Congo au centre. Imaginez-vous, si ces pays étaient dans une situation normale, quel sera l'impact sur la puissance économique du continent africain? C'est dire, sincèrement, sans compter le bassin du lac Tchad, où la plus grande puissance démographique et économique du continent, le Nigeria, est dans une situation des plus difficiles. Donc, les questions de sécurité et de stabilité sont fondamentales. Elles sont à notre portée. Elles sont à notre portée. Et vous êtes témoins. Quand nous nous sommes engagés sur le Fonds de la paix, qui a été mis en place depuis 1993, en une année, nous avons pu mobiliser plus de 116 millions de dollars. Il faut qu'on se convainque que c'est notre affaire. D'abord, avant de s'adresser aux autres. Il ne faut pas que des puissances extérieures, avec leurs bases, protègent nos pays. Nous avons la capacité, ensemble. Les forces africaines en attendent, ça fait combien de temps? Elles attendent toujours. Ce n'est pas normal. Ce n'est pas normal. Donc c'est une question de conviction. Nous avons les instruments, nous avons les potentiels économiques, humains, les capacités ensemble de faire ça. L'exemple du Soudan, l'un des pays les plus importants et qui est déstabilisé, qui connaît des problèmes depuis plusieurs décennies. Une mission de l'Union africaine, une mission des Nations unies, une mission mixte dans ce pays. Il y a un changement. À la différence, c'est un mouvement populaire extraordinaire qui a amené l'armée et la sécurité de pouvoir rallier le mouvement. Jusqu'à là, nous sommes dans une situation de blocage. Nous avons envoyé notre mission qui est sur place et qui travaille jusqu'à ce matin, je parle avec eux. Nous avons réussi quand même à rapprocher les points de vue en disant à nos partenaires, c'est une affaire d'abord africaine. Laissez-nous interagir avec les parties soudanaises en leur disant qu'au moins dans la phase transitoire, vous devez de travailler ensemble. Armée et sécurité, puisqu'à un certain moment, vous êtes retrouvés, vous êtes dans l'obligation de pouvoir trouver un processus inclusif pendant la transition qui puisse permettre au peuple soudanais, à l'issue de cette transition, de choisir ses dirigeants. C'est possible, M. Kaberuka. On l'a vu, mais très souvent, parfois, on compte sur les autres. Les ingérences sont notoires et sont connues dans cette région et ailleurs. Il faut éviter de s'offrir davantage en spectacle.
Thank you, Moussa. So I will now turn to you, the audience. Please make use of this opportunity to interact with the leaders. Ask any question, however sensitive it is. I'm sure the leaders will be happy to answer. And we're going to be 50-50 agenda. So who wants to speak? Put your hands up. Right. There's someone here who is very insisting, behind Vera.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Wal Elizabeth. I work for AMREF in Kenya. My question is to the whole panel. Being the leaders of the 3 countries that are represented here, being the leadership, I wanted to find out at what point does the buck stop with you? What measures have you put in place? Because the report is saying people are not, the indicators, people are not reporting, or the finances are not enough. But at what point does the buck stop with you as the leadership? And what have you put in place, measures to amend that? Thank you.
I'll take 2 more. The gentleman up there.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nengo Ali, a young man who's struggling just to try to solve some of the SDG goals. And my question goes to Your Excellency, Mr. Musa. I would like to ask you, you who have the overall sight of Africa, how does the young people contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals in their solutions? And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my president, Mr. Paul Kagame, for what he does, as he does whatever it takes to make this country and the whole Africa a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. But I didn't hear the question, though. What was the question?
Thank you. My question was about how does the youth is involved into the solutions about the sustainable development goals, which is going straight to Mr. Musa. Thank you.
Okay, the youth. Someone at the end there?
Thank you. My name is Jean-Claude Mutabazi. Of course, this is an eye-opening of a 3-year journey, as the MC said. I would like to ask, to convey my questions to the whole panel, since they are on the leadership of the countries. Like, how is the collaboration between countries are going? Aussi pour Moussa Faki, qui a dit que le gouvernement dépense le budget dans le management de sécurité. Comment on peut utiliser les ressources qu'on a pour que les pays renforcent les collaborations entre eux? Et aussi, for my presidents who are on the panel, which are the alarming challenges that needs to be addressed? Of course, we say we need to invest in agriculture, we need to invest in health, but also we forget about there's climate change and conflicts on the continent. So how are we going to do with that when there's conflict on the continent? So what is that challenge that needs to be addressed, like really, really fast?
Okay, so I'll take this person here. Yes, you. And then I'll come to the leaders here.
Thank you so much. My name is Hajjaj Said Abakar. I'm from Chad and work with the African Peer Review Mechanism. I'm glad to see His Excellency, Paul Kagame, because yesterday when Her Excellency Dr. Tyler gave her a speech, I asked her which kind of leader do we need to follow to achieve those goals, and she was so kind to give me a reference. One of them is His Excellency's Mr. Paul Kagame. I have 2 questions, if it's not too much.
You just have one question.
One. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can combine them. Okay. So my question is that, the SDGs are the responsibility of everyone. So in the SDGs reform, which kind of language have been used to reach those people. Like if I want to talk to the farmer, which language I'm going to use? Is it the language of SDGs experts or their own language? To make them better understand. I'm not talking about the maternal language or tongue, mother tongue, no. The way that will understanding better. And I'm combining that as a leader, this question is for His Excellencies Paul Kagame and His Excellencies Moussa Faki. As they know Africa better than the rest of us here, where are we?
So your question is about communication with the public?
That's the communication, and where are we, what is the hope that will be achieving those goals by 2030?
No, I will have the first question. Yeah. So let me come to President Lungu, the last one about collaboration among countries.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you, President Lungu, because of what you have done to ensure the Kazungula Bridge is done finally. For those of you who don't know, there is a border on the Zambezi where 4 countries meet: Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia and Botswana. And when I first visited, they were still using a 50-year-old pontoon. Trucks were waiting for up to a week. And the institution I was leading had provided the money. Money was available. But one of the countries did not want the bridge. But that country was not Zambia. And Zambians worked very, very hard to ensure that this bridge was done. I think this was a major signal of collaboration. I want to thank you. But if you want to add something on how countries can work together to give SDGs a greater chance.
I think it starts with our center, SDG Center for Africa, where we are seated now. If we can replicate this, we are already doing that with the SADC region, going to have a center in Lusaka, Zambia, and I think in the Western region, Monrovia in Liberia. And I think going forward, it's these economic blocks which will break down to entities in regional groupings, either of economic or political integration, which will see us succeed. Because it's a question of good practices. What can you learn from your neighbor? And I think I'm learning a lot from President Paul Kagame. I'm learning a lot from others who have been there before me. And I hope that I also be remembered as a good leader. It's very important. So we need to look to ourselves and our people in the region to start with. What is it that we can do for them? What is it that they really deserve as a priority? And then we go down and interact with them. And if we think that what they think is not a priority, we should engage them. We show them why we think education probably could be the game changer for them. If we think it's agriculture and we are not developing because there is no communication network, is not the technology, we have to begin interrogating them on this idea. And at the end of the day, when we agree that we emerge as good leaders, now I'm saying this in answer to what kind of leaders we look for. It's leaders who communicate, who reach out to the people in their very basic form. And the language doesn't matter. What matters is the essence of what you are talking to them. If they appreciate, they buy into your vision, then you qualify to be considered as a great leader. I think that beyond our regions, when we meet like this, we are sharing ideas of good practices and innovative ways of overcoming challenges which we may meet in implementing our goals. I believe with this program we have brought for ourselves, the SDGs will perform much, much better than we did in the MDGs. That I can assure you. And a good number of us will emerge as good leaders.
And thank you for agreeing to host the SDG Center in Lusaka. Congratulations. But on this issue of how we communicate with the people, how do we avoid technicalities? How do we ensure that this simple concept, which SDGs, is communicated in a way which we are not talking to ourselves? We're actually talking to every citizen. How do you think you can improve on this communication with every ordinary person?
It's for me, because the questions were to the panel. So, yeah, I think that the best teacher is in the community. The best teacher is amongst the people who have the vision, who are facing the challenges. So we should be able to identify who do people listen to. Take, for example, the issue we've been grappling with on the early child marriage in Zambia. We have used traditional leaders, and we are doing very well because they respect them, and the people understand that these are our vision carriers. Like again, if you are going to talk about the same girls whom we want to liberate from early child marriage and falling out of school at early age, we do have role models. People have made it. Some of them are vice presidents, like my good vice president in Liberia. Others are leaders in districts and the provinces who originate from the same areas where you want to go and achieve a certain objective. You have to take them there. So they've been speaking to the communities in their own language to say, look, I'm here now. I'm a leader in the province or in the republic. I'm at this level. You too can do it. But I did it because I avoided early pregnancy, for example. I kept away from playing around and I focused on books and so on. So I think that there's no blueprint one can say will fit all. What happens is the various cultural backgrounds we may have could determine the form that we take in communicating to the people. Liberia is a good example. Rwanda is a good example. When you talk to them about peace, they know what it means to be without peace. Zambia, for example, has been relatively peace throughout, so they don't know what the absence of peace does. So when you talk to them, you should market and package your message in such a manner that they begin appreciating, even from a conceptual premise, that peace is important. So I think that we cannot define hard and fast rules to say this is how you reach out to your people. The history, the tradition, the background, the challenges and the culture will determine how you package your message. The SDGs can apply globally to all of Africa, but how we package them matters. That's why we involve lower platforms, communities, wards, and sections who know exactly what challenges they face. For example, in some parts of the country, we have high incidences of pregnancy. So we cannot universally or nationally say the strategy will be this across the board. For those who have a propensity to get early married, we have a package. For those who probably have a fear or phobia of being oppressed, because we are also some male chauvinists who don't want girls to prosper. So we tackle those in that manner. I think that each situation calls for its own rules, but the principles remain the same. We want to emancipate our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I think there was a question for you from here and there. One was on the youth, another was on leadership.
Let me link it, though, with what the President of Zambia has been answering. There's the youth, then the leadership. Then there is the problem to have to deal with generally to do with development. I think the question that was asked about what language do we use to communicate to people was very important. And I'm linking the two because the youth are a big part of our society that we have to pay attention to, invest in, and so on and so forth. But it is important also to say that within the youth, our people, there must be this responsiveness. The youth must grow understanding their importance, but their responsibility as well. So how do the young people become part of the solution and not just be thought of as a problem, but rather as a solution? If the youth would not connect with the local communities, with the understanding of what the problem is, and therefore their responsibility and action towards dealing with that problem. So, and they are linked in a sense, and very important, the language you use You see, we must create an environment or put in place processes or whatever literature we use to explain what the problem is to our people. All these must be user-friendly. The person receiving that must be able to understand indeed what is being talked about. And the leaders, therefore, their role would be to make sure that you create that link between what is the solution that is being put forward to address the problem, and then show how the solution is linked with the problem and solving that problem. And in between there being that responsibility of the leader and then the people who are experiencing the problem also being part of that solution and therefore carrying a responsibility. So we should not always fall for this easy sort of way of conceiving things. It's like there is a leader who is there, who is supposed to address problems of people have. The leader will have to make sure that they mobilize, they solicit responsibility and engagement of the people who are experiencing the problems. That is the main task. But in the end, a big part lies with the very people in our communities, whether it is the young people or the women. But you have to make sure that they are engaged, you make them responsible, but you provide indeed that leadership or the environment, you create that environment that allows them to do what each one can do to have a solution results. For example, let me use this example, and again building on the language and the communication, how do you reach people? The problem we had here of justice, we had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people demanding justice. Now, if we had just gone the technical way, the route of taking everybody to court, tried, and defense lawyers, and everything, we would not have done even 0.1% of the problem by now. But what did we do? We looked from within our history, our traditions, how to resolve problems, disputes, grievances. This is where the gacaca comes from. So when you're talking to when we were talking to our people, I'm talking about using communities to address these problems of justice and not turning justice into just a technical issue. We actually found a way to resolve the problem, because the communities would choose people they trust to listen to their grievances, and in the process arrive at problem being resolved. Now, we made it easy for people to understand, because gacaca is their thing, it's their history, it's their culture. They understood this is a way to resolve a problem. And the person who has a problem, who is being accused, comes out. As long as they tell the truth, the communities will forgive, and they would even level a penalty against whoever is accused if they found guilty. And they did it in a certain way that it was both punitive but also forgiving, as a way of bringing these people back into the community. Therefore, we achieved two twin objectives, one being reconciliation, another being justice. I don't think you would have we would have achieved anything going simply the technical way of dealing with this that is so academic. You know, we had we have so many lawyers, and you know, they come and they spend the whole day talking about the problem in a very nice language. In the end, whether they find a nice solution is a different issue. So the communication, even with the poverty, when you go to poor rural areas and you are talking to these people, what may make their difference in terms of creating wealth, improving their living standards, and so on, you want to package it in a way that fits directly in the environment they live in, because they are the ones living these problems. Poverty hurts the very poor first, before those of us who can articulate, you know, what it means. So you must find a language, you must find examples, you must find a way of connecting with the actual people and their problems while you work with them to find a solution.
Thank you, President. Vice President Taylor, please, any question?
You see, this platform is not gender friendly.
We shall do better next time.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it's difficult to speak after President Paul Kagame, but I'll definitely try. I know. Yes, you are. I think the way to solve the issues is to take governance to the level of the people. Because really, when you get elected on a platform, it's to solve the problems that people have. And it's easier to win an election and make all of the promises. And when it's time to fulfill them, then some leaders step back, and I think it's wrong. I believe that is why we have a lot of the youth problems that we have across Africa. That they come out and they campaign and they believe that you will actually transform their lives. And then when you get elected, you realize that, hey, this is a very serious issue. What should you do? Go back to the local people, go back to the young people, find out what the real issues are, find ways of solving it. And if you're having challenges, you should go back so that they buy in and they go along with you. Africans are very resilient. And if they understand what the issues are and they see themselves in what you're trying to do, it definitely makes a lot of difference. For us, we're privileged that Liberia was chosen to open the West African Center for the SDGs. I think Zambia was approached much later. I hear from Dr. Bigasha, even though we had a one-year jump, we're still struggling to put our office in place, but we'll definitely do so we can invite the Zambian president to come and dedicate our office. But I think that is just one phase of it. The second phase is how do governments take the high moral ground and put in place those systems and change the way governance is done across Africa to benefit the lives of our people. And I think that is what all of us must do if we must fulfill the SDGs. Because again, there are opportunities, there are challenges, but we can work it through, bringing our people on board, letting them see that it's not about the small percentage of those who are at the top, and that is actually about how they too can get involved in helping governments solve the problems that they have.
Thank you, thank you. And congratulations on accepting to host the SDG Center in Monrovia. Musa, I'm advised that we are holding up lunch, and the leaders have another program. So Musa will make the last comment. And unless there's something very important, very original, we shall then try to bring the panel to a close. It has to be very original, something we have not heard before, and it can only be one. So, Musa.
Merci. On m'a posé la question sur le rôle de la jeunesse dans l'atteinte des objectifs des ODD. Je pense du fait que la jeunesse est la majorité absolue. Elle a naturellement une responsabilité également absolue. Le tout, c'est de la mettre au centre des préoccupations. Je crois que très souvent, on a fait preuve, il faut le reconnaître, de faiblesse intellectuelle. Leadership intellectuel, organisation, société civile. Je crois que la jeunesse, de par sa formation, on peut déterminer le rôle qu'elle peut jouer. Nous avons hérité d'un certain nombre de choses qui, ma foi, sont devenues complètement anachroniques. Dire qu'il faut former des gens pour devenir des fonctionnaires, ce n'est plus d'actualité. Ce n'est plus d'actualité. Il faut que les jeunes, donc il faut adapter la formation, il faut libérer les énergies, il faut également prôner la valeur travail. Parce que sans le travail, on ne peut jamais changer quoi que ce soit. Nous sommes habitués à des modèles où on forme des élites, des intellectuels qui doivent travailler dans les bureaux. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui est complètement dépassé. Donc, la responsabilité du leadership est une responsabilité des moyens. Il faut créer les conditions pour que les gens aient la formation nécessaire et qu'ils aient la conscience par rapport à leurs responsabilités historiques. Je parlerai comme les gens de la gauche. Deuxièmement, quelqu'un dans la Grèce antique, il a dit « Mobilisez-moi la jeunesse et laissez-moi faire ». Si vous arrivez à mobiliser, à communiquer avec la jeunesse, je crois que vous allez faire la différence. Ce qui a été possible ici, au Rwanda, il y a 25 ans, plus d'1 million d'êtres humains ont été exterminés ici. 25 ans après ce qui est réalisé ici, je crois que c'est un exemple. C'est un exemple qu'avec de la volonté, de la vision, avec une mobilisation d'un peuple et surtout sa jeunesse, on peut faire la différence. Cela est possible. Et les exemples sont là et nous sommes ici à Kigali. La deuxième question sur les pays qui dépensent des sommes importantes à leur corps défendant. Vous prenez les pays du G5 Sahel. C'est une zone que je connais parce que je suis originaire de là-bas. Vous voyez le Niger, le Tchad, le Mali, le Burkina. Aujourd'hui, pour certains, plus du tiers de leur budget est consacré à la sécurité. Ce sont des espaces vides. On a une menace toute particulière, le terrorisme et le trafic de sous-genres. C'est des territoires vastes. Celui que je connais le mieux, c'est mon village, le Tchad. Pour aller d'N'Djamena à Bardaï, c'est 2000 km à travers le désert. Si vous devez intervenir une force là-bas, vous allez dépenser énormément de moyens. Il faut, c'est pour cela, une solidarité, une prise de conscience continentale. Ils ont essayé de mettre en place le G5 Sahel, qui est une force commune. Je constate, et Monsieur le Président Kagame, ce n'est pas vous offenser que de vous dire, quand même ici, dans ce bâtiment, quand la question vous a été expliquée, le Rwanda est le seul pays africain à avoir contribué pour $1 million en soutien au G5 Sahel. Est-ce que c'est normal? Est-ce que c'est normal? Il n'est pas normal, vraiment, dans des circonstances pareilles, que l'on ne fasse pas l'effort nous-mêmes en attendant la contribution des partenaires. Ça également, c'est une façon de réfléchir qui n'est pas la bonne. Le problème est le nôtre. Nous devrions être les premiers à assumer notre part de responsabilité. Nos amis peuvent venir par la suite. Ça, ce sont des choses évidentes et que nous vivons actuellement. Les réflexes de solidarité, on l'a constaté dans le bassin du lac Tchad, Nigeria, Cameroun, Tchad, Niger ont mis en commun une force et ils ont pu contenir. C'est vrai, Boko Haram continue à encore faire des dégâts, mais ils ont pu contenir parce que Boko Haram occupait des villes. Donc c'est par la solidarité qu'on peut agir efficacement et soulager les pays qui sont sous forte pression. Ça sont des choses, à mon avis, qui sont... Comment parler sur les SDGs aux populations, par exemple? En dehors de la question de la langue, je crois que c'est le contenu du message qui est important. Il arrive, et ce n'est pas rare, qu'un Africain va dans son village, il va parler en français ou en anglais, il va demander à un interprète d'interpréter à ses parents qu'est-ce qu'il est en train de dire. Ça également, c'est des choses, je crois qu'il faut donner. D'abord, il faut expliquer aux gens, si vous allez à Béché, il faut parler aux gens en arabe. Parce que c'est le seul langage qu'ils comprennent pour leur expliquer c'est quoi aller à l'école, amener les filles à l'école. Je crois que ça, c'est la première des choses à faire. Deuxièmement, il faut éviter le mimétisme si on veut donner un contenu. Le président Kagame a raison. Aujourd'hui, combien de tribunaux existent dans nos États pour pouvoir régler les problèmes de la justice? Il faut un procureur, il n'est pas venu, il est dans la capitale, on attend 6 mois. Le tribunal est arrêté, on attend un procureur qui vient. C'est complètement vide. Il faut trouver vraiment, dans nos ressources, nous sommes une société, nous avons nos règles, il faut être original et trouver des solutions pour pouvoir. Sur le plan administratif, le modèle que nous avons hérité n'est plus à même de régler nos problèmes. Donc il faut faire preuve d'imagination et adapter nos réalités pour régler des problèmes concrets de tous les jours. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We could continue this conversation for the whole day. But
Can I make just one important point?
Time is limited.
2 minutes.
Time is limited. But the Vice President has ordered me, so I have to comply. There is someone at the back there. You will have to be the last. And you have to thank the Vice President for that. Yes, that person.
Your Excellencies and Heads of State, good evening. My name is Esther. I'm from the African Leadership University. And mine is not a question. Sorry, Dr. Donald. It's more of a statement in regards to the SDGs. I think Dr. Belay will agree with me that all the SDGs have equal importance. They're all of equal importance, but there's one that stands out, especially for the African continent, and that would be the final one, which is SDG 17, partnering to achieve the goals. And I think from everything that has been said, we should focus on this. It will involve partnering with the youth, partnering with women, which, according to the UN, are the most important groups. This is the largest untapped resource on the continent to drive development. It will involve, community engagement, which I'm very excited that, His Excellency Paul Kagame touched on, user-friendliness, it's an exciting I think going forward, we should focus on SDG 17 because it ties in everything that we're working towards. And it will involve more engagement such as this, where members of the community, members of the public can be able to engage with their heads of state and ask relevant questions and get a level of interaction and meaningful dialogue, going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Vice President.
And in my closing statements, I just want to say 2 important things. I don't think we should leave the panel this afternoon without talking about the need to begin to open the African Fund that we've all been speaking about. Even if we don't have the first cent, the Peace Fund is an example of beginning a process. I believe if the African Fund for Health and Water Resources is opened, and African leaders can be coerced or encouraged to begin to pay some contribution towards it, I think it jumpstarts what we need to do. And the last thing I would like to say, and if I don't say it, I think when I get home I'll probably be whipped, is the issue of gender equality, the number 5th agenda. I think if you lift women out of poverty, you can solve so many of these issues. A woman who's trained and educated, automatically her family is a little bit more secure. If family gets out of poverty, there won't be much hunger. Quality education will come into place. Of course, she wants clean water for her children, decent work. That one aspect, and there's not much talk about it, and even at the SDG Center, they're talking around it, but if we begin to look at how we empower women, we can solve a lot of the SDG problems, and it will help jumpstart us into the future. And I think that's an angle I'm hoping we'll pay more attention to as we proceed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President. I think, Dr. Begesh, there'll be some conversation on the fund later in the day. And maybe that should be the time to talk about its structure and how it's funded. Is that right? Thank you. So please join me in thanking our leadership here on the panel.